Hey guys, it's Dawn and I'm back as promised with another video featuring watercoloring your main images. Now, we are going to be cheating by using our stamps as a guide, and then we're going to use our watercolors to color in these beautiful butterflies. And this is a very simple technique. So we're going to be using the Flora and Fauna 2 stamp set, and this just released on August 5th, and it's filled with these great lined images. We're going to be using the largest butterfly here, and we're going to begin by stamping that in a water-soluble ink onto watercolor paper. Now, I'll be using Antique Linen Distress Ink, and I like this one because it's super light. And actually, mine is incredibly light. Yours may be a little darker, but I think this is the very first distress ink pad I ever bought. And it's like 5 years old, if not more, and it's never been re-inked. So mine is quite light. So now we have this very light impression. It's just dark enough to serve as our guide so we'll know where to paint, but not so dark that it's going to show in our finished product. I'll be using a number 8 flat brush to paint these images today. I'm going to start by wetting the entire image with just clear, clean water. Now, normally I wouldn't be so overly careful when I'm just pre-wetting the area that I'm about to paint. However, we're going to be painting all of this in one pass. We're going to be doing a lot of wet into wet, and I don't want to have to come back afterwards and correct any areas or go over any areas. I want all of this to really appear as though it was painted in one pass. So I'm being careful to make sure that my edges are crisp. And this flat brush really allows me to easily get that crisp edge. You could use a round brush or any other brush that you had on hand, but I find that this flat brush, it just has this real chisel tip and it just makes this part a lot easier. Once the image is all wet, I'm going to start dropping in my color. Now I have mixed sap green and phthalo blue to create this kind of tealish green or tealish blue, whichever you prefer. I think it's a little more on the green side, so I'm going to call it tealish green. But you're just going to start dropping that in, and I'm dropping it close to the body of the butterfly, and I'm dropping some on the top wing and the bottom wing. Now you'll notice there's a slight gap between the top and the bottom wing, and that's because I left that spot dry. I'm not going to leave them completely separated, but once it got to the edge, I did want it to have a little gap of separation between the two colors, so I purposely left that area more dry. I'm also going to hit the upper outer tips of the wings and then the bottom tips of the wings. And you'll notice that as I pull the color across the paper, wherever my brush stops and I lift, I get this little concentrated area of color. I'm just going to leave that be because I think it's going to dry really nicely. I've rinsed my brush and now I'm going to pick up some yellow ochre. And this was a little bit more intense, a little more vibrant yellow than I wanted it to be, so I added a touch of purple to it. Now there are opposites on the color wheel, so anytime you have a color that is too intense or too vibrant, you can always add its opposite to it and it'll tone it down a little bit. In this case, the purple tones down that bright yellow and makes it a little more earthy. And I'm just dropping that along the edges of both the upper and lower wings. Now my paper's still wet, so these are going to continue to blend into each other. It's not going to be as noticeable as it would be if my paper was extremely saturated, but that paper is still damp. I'm going to help it along just a little bit here, but for the most part, it's still going to blend quite beautifully. I'm going to pick up more of that teal color that I've mixed, and I'm just going to drop a little bit more along the center line where the two wings meet, and then just tap along some of the edges of the wings, just the very tips. I'm not completely outlining it, I'm just hitting random little edges here and there. So the paper has started to dry, but it's still wet, and I'm going to pick up more of that color and I'm going to start adding some intense color now. You can see I'm just tapping along the edges close to where the butterfly's body would be. And then I'm actually going to use the corner of my brush and pull out some, I don't want to say veins, but pull out some lines of color. Just going to use a flicking motion to flick it out. Now I'm going to pick up more of that yellow ochre and I'm going to intensify some of the edges, some of the areas around the outer edge of the wings. And I'm adding a pretty concentrated mix of color here. There's not much water on the brush or the palette, and you can see that there when I'm pulling it up, I'm using quite a thick concentration of paint. You'll notice that I'm working in layers. Now I'm going to pick up some Payne's Gray and I'm going to put in the indication of the body. Now this isn't going to be the final body, but it's an indication of where it's going to be. This will lay down my light color and then I can just add a darker spot and that will flow into the lighter areas and create a nice variation of color for me. You can see here it's pretty thick. It's not extremely thick, but it's not super watery either. And I'm going to start adding little bits of this to the wing. Now since we've got that Payne's Gray in the center, I didn't want it to be the only spot of gray. I want to balance this out. So I'm just hitting some random little spots on the butterfly itself and letting that kind of flow into the other colors. This keeps that center from being your focus. If just that body was black or gray, that's the first thing you would look at. By adding some more of that Payne's Gray throughout the rest of the picture, it balances it and your eye doesn't automatically go straight to that body. So we're almost done. We're just going to add some more intense color just to add a little contrast to this. So I've picked up more of that teal green and I'm just kind of dabbing it in here, using some little flicking motions sometimes and using little dabbing motions other times. And again, I'll do the same thing with the Payne's Gray. Just add a little more intense color wherever I think it needs it to balance it. Those few random dark spots of color really add a lot of interest. Now we're going to deepen up this body just a bit because now the body looks too light. And to do that, I'm going to take the corner of the brush and I'm just going to press it down twice and then do a quick little downward swipe. And that gave me an irregular body shape without it looking deliberately drawn. The last thing to do is just go over those little antennae, and for that I'm going to use a script liner brush. I'm going to get a very, very thick concentration of Payne's Gray loaded up on here, and then just trace over the antenna that we stamped. And finally, I'm just going to use that liner brush to add a few finishing details. I felt like the Payne's Gray was overpowering the yellow ochre a bit, so we're going to use a thick concentration of that and the liner brush to just add a little bit more of it back into the wings. I'm adding a little bit more to just the corners and the very bottom of the bottom wing. And really, that's all there is to it. It's very simple, like I told you, and it doesn't take very long. I didn't cut hardly anything out of this yet, and we're at, what, 8.5 minutes? So it's really quick and it's really easy. We'll just be adding a simple sentiment to this, and we'll be stamping it in Old Gold dye ink. Now this is from our hand-lettered thanks stamp set, and it says our one of a kind. It's meant to go with the U, the big U in the set. I'm just going to do one of a kind. So I'm going to take some Post-it tape here and I'm going to mask off the word R, and then I'm going to ink up the rest of the sentiment, then remove the Post-it tape and then just stamp it. And then just to finish it off, I'm going to add some splatters. I'm using a number 4 round brush and a diluted mix of that same yellow ochre, and I'm just tapping the brush over the image a couple times. And that's really all there is to this card. After that, I mounted it to a standard 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card base using foam tape, and then I made another version using alizarin crimson and quinacridone gold and brown. Now these are so easy to do and they turn out so pretty, and the images are a great size. So I think like a series of these, and you could even do 3 in a row. I think they would look good framed, put up in a nursery or a little girl's room. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget you can find all the featured W+9 supplies at W+9.com. You can find more product information and more photos over on our blog at stampawaywithme.blogspot.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest. Thank you so much much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye.